Welcome back, everyone. I'm Liz Kedantis.
I'm Jim Grimes. A woman murdered at a condominium over in Boynton Beach happening earlier today. And just into our newsroom, an arrest has now been made.
Relatives tell CBS 12 News the woman went to the police station to report her ex-boyfriend was following her, and when she returned home, he was waiting for her in the parking lot armed with a gun.
"Oh, did you bring a gun to kill me?" These were the last words Friedelene Daniels spoke before 10 gunshots shattered the morning silence. But here's what makes this case absolutely terrifying. Just 45 minutes earlier, she had done everything right. She had sought help. She had filed a police report. Welcome back to Shadows of Crime. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button, because today's case will leave you questioning everything about seeking help when you're in danger. November 8th, 2023, Friedelene Daniels, a 34-year-old mother, dropped her 16-year-old daughter off at school. As she pulled away, she noticed something that made her blood run cold. She was being followed. The black Honda in her rearview mirror belonged to Robin Cesar, her 41-year-old ex-boyfriend, who couldn't accept their relationship was over. Instead of going home, Friedelene made a decision that should have saved her life. At 8:15 that morning, she drove straight to the Boynton Beach Police Department. What she didn't know was that Cesar was already there, waiting in the lobby. Inside that police station, body cam footage captured Friedelene's desperate plea to Officer Jermaine Jones. Fear trembling in her voice, she said words that should have triggered immediate action. "I don't want you make me die." She told the officer she was afraid for her life. She told him Cesar had a gun. She begged for protection. But sometimes, doing everything right isn't enough. Have you ever felt unsafe in your own neighborhood? Drop a comment below and let me know what state you're watching from. Because what unfolded in the next 45 minutes would expose a deadly gap in our system, the terrifying space between asking for help and actually receiving it. The clock was ticking and time was running out. Friedelene Daniels had been trying to rebuild her life piece by piece in the quiet suburban streets of Boynton Beach, Florida. At 34, she embodied the resilience of countless single mothers who juggle work, parenting, and the constant hope for something better. Her modest apartment at the Meadows on Green complex became a sanctuary where she focused on what mattered most, raising her 16-year-old daughter and creating the stable foundation that had been missing from her own recent past. The Haitian-American woman carried herself with a quiet dignity that spoke to her heritage and the strength passed down through generations of women who had survived far worse. Her aunt back in Haiti would call regularly, their conversations flowing between English and Creole, sharing family news and offering the kind of wisdom that only comes from weathering life's storms. These calls were lifelines, connecting Friedelene to roots that ran deeper than the pain she was trying to leave behind. Her daughter was everything to her, a bright teenager with dreams that stretched far beyond the boundaries of their small world. Friedelene worked tirelessly to ensure those dreams remained possible, taking on extra shifts and making sacrifices that went unnoticed by everyone except the young woman, who watched her mother's determination with a mixture of admiration and concern. The teenager had witnessed too much already, had seen her mother's previous relationship drain the light from her eyes, and now celebrated every small sign that her mother was finding herself again. The toxic relationship Friedelene had finally escaped had left scars that weren't immediately visible. Friends and family had watched with relief as she found the courage to walk away from a man whose love came wrapped in control and whose affection was measured in possessiveness. She had been rebuilding slowly, learning to trust her own judgment again, rediscovering the woman she had been before fear became her constant companion. But healing isn't linear, and the heart doesn't always follow the mind's careful plans. Even as Friedelene focused on creating a peaceful life for herself and her daughter, even as she promised herself she would never again ignore the red flags that had once seemed like passionate devotion, something was already shifting in the shadows of her carefully constructed new beginning. The patterns that destroy us rarely announce themselves with fanfare. They slip in quietly, disguised as second chances and wrapped in the familiar comfort of what we think we know. For Friedelene Daniels, a woman who had fought so hard to escape one dangerous love, another was already taking shape. one that would prove far more deadly than anything she had survived before. Robin Cesar was 41 years old when he met Friedelene Daniel, 7 years her senior, and carrying the kind of intensity that can feel like passion until it reveals itself as something far more dangerous. What began as a relationship had devolved into a nightmare that Friedelene couldn't seem to escape even after she found the courage to walk away. The breakup should have been the end of their story. For most people, when someone says, "it's over," that's where the chapter closes. But Cesar operated by different rules, rules written by obsession and enforced by an ego that couldn't accept rejection. In his mind, Friedelene belonged to him, and her decision to leave wasn't a choice he was willing to respect. His own words would later reveal the twisted logic that drove him to destruction. Could not stand to see her with another man. This wasn't love speaking, it was ownership. In Cesar's warped worldview, Friedelene wasn't a person with her own agency and desires. She was a possession that had been stolen from him, and he was determined to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. The harassment began almost immediately after their breakup. Phone calls at all hours, showing up at her workplace, following her car through the streets of Boynton Beach. Friedelene would catch glimpses of his black Honda in her rearview mirror and feel her heart race, knowing that her day of peace was about to be shattered. He had turned her own neighborhood into a hunting ground, transforming familiar streets into sources of anxiety. But here's what makes cases like this so particularly chilling. The behavior escalates in a predictable pattern that experts have studied for decades. Possessive partners don't simply accept rejection and move on. Instead, they often interpret the end of a relationship as the beginning of a campaign to regain control. The stalking, the harassment, the constant surveillance. These aren't random acts of desperation. They're calculated attempts to wear down their victim's resistance and reassert dominance. Psychologists call it intimate partner terrorism, and it follows a script that's been played out in countless relationships across the country. The abuser believes that if they can just make their victim's life difficult enough, if they can isolate them from support systems and create enough chaos, eventually their target will give in and return. It's a strategy built on the assumption that love can be forced, that fear can substitute for affection. For Friedelene, each day became a careful calculation of risk. Where could she go safely? Which routes home would avoid his usual haunts? How could she protect her daughter from witnessing the slow-motion destruction of their peace? But on the morning of November 8, 2023, all of Cesar's simmering rage and obsession would finally boil over into something far more deadly than harassment. The pattern that had been building for months was about to reach its horrifying conclusion, and this time there would be no escape. November 8, 2023 started like any other Wednesday morning in Boynton Beach. Friedelene Daniel went through her usual routine, getting her 16-year-old daughter ready for school, grabbing a quick breakfast, and heading out into the Florida sunshine. But as she pulled away from the school drop-off, something in her rearview mirror made her blood turn cold. The black Honda. Again, Robin Cesar was following her, just as he had been for weeks. But this morning felt different. More deliberate, more threatening. The way he maintained his distance while keeping her in sight. The persistence, despite her attempts to lose him by taking random turns. Friedeline's hands tightened on the steering wheel as a terrible realization washed over her. This wasn't going to stop on its own. Instead of driving home, where she would be alone and vulnerable, Friedelene made what should have been a life-saving decision. At 8:15 a.m., she drove straight to the Boynton Beach Police Department. If there was anywhere she should be safe, anywhere she could get the help she desperately needed, it was there. But when she walked through those doors, her worst nightmare was waiting for her. Cesar was already inside, sitting calmly in the lobby as if he had been expecting her. The predator had anticipated his prey's next move, positioning himself between Friedelene and the safety she sought. The police station, the one place that should have been her sanctuary, had become another trap. Officer Jameen Jones responded to Friedeline's desperate request for help, and what happened next was captured on body cam footage that would later become crucial evidence.
Hey, he want to know why you don't want it anymore. That's all.
No, I don't want it because...
You just don't want it?
No. When I move in there, I don't want him behind me because he have a gang. I don't want him to make me die.
Officer Jones walks over and checks to see if Caesar has a gun. 5 minutes later, Jones lets Caesar walk out of the front door.
She don't want it no more. You can't fix this, okay? You gotta find you a new boo, okay? Work on a new relationship, all right? You done? Yeah, I'm done. You good.
With fear trembling in her voice, Friedeline poured out her terror to the officer. She explained about the stalking, the harassment, the constant fear that had consumed her life. Then came the words that should have triggered immediate action. I don't want you make me die. This wasn't a casual complaint about an annoying ex-boyfriend. This was a woman begging for her life, telling a police officer that she believed she was in mortal danger. She told Jones that Caesar had a gun. She explained that he couldn't accept their breakup. She painted a clear picture of a man whose obsession had crossed the line into something deadly. But Officer Jones' response was shockingly inadequate. Instead of treating this as the emergency it clearly was, instead of recognizing the signs that domestic violence experts train officers to identify, he handled it like a routine civil dispute. No immediate protection was offered. No emergency measures were put in place. At 9:00 a.m., both Friedeline and Caesar left the police station. She had done everything right. Sought help, filed a report, begged for protection. But as she walked back to her car, she was still alone, still vulnerable, and still being hunted by a man who had already proven he would stop at nothing to control her. What happened in the next few minutes would expose the deadly gap between asking for help and actually receiving it. Before we continue with what happened next, I want you to pause for a moment and think about this. Here's a woman who did everything our society tells us to do when we're in danger. She went to the police. She filed a report. She told them her life was in danger. She even told them her stalker had a gun. What do you think should have happened when she left that police station? Drop a comment below and let me know, because what actually happened will make your blood boil. Friedeline Daniel drove home to her apartment at the Meadows on Green complex, probably thinking she had bought herself some time, some protection. Maybe she believed that having made an official report, Caesar would finally back off. Maybe she thought the police would follow up, would take action. She was wrong on all counts. Caesar hadn't given up. He had simply changed tactics. While Friedeline was inside the police station pleading for her life, he was calculating his next move. He knew where she lived. He knew her routines. And he knew that she would eventually have to come home. When Friedeline arrived at her apartment complex, Caesar was already there, lying in wait like a predator who had cornered his prey. The black Honda that had terrorized her for weeks was positioned strategically, giving him a clear view of her movements while keeping him hidden from immediate sight. What happened next was captured not by security cameras or police body cams, but by something far more heartbreaking: a phone call with family. Friedeline had connected with her aunt in Haiti, seeking comfort in the familiar voice of someone who loved her unconditionally. Her aunt would later tell investigators that she could hear everything through the phone, making her an unwitting, real-time witness to the horror that was about to unfold. As Friedeline talked to her aunt, probably trying to process the morning's events and find some sense of normalcy, Caesar approached. The conversation that had been flowing in the comfortable mix of English and Creole that connected Friedeline to her roots was about to be shattered by violence. Her aunt heard Friedeline's voice change, heard the fear creep back in as she realized Caesar was there, and then, captured forever in the memory of a woman thousands of miles away who could do nothing to help, came Friedeline's final words. "Oh, did you bring a gun to kill me?" 10 gunshots shattered the morning silence. 10 bullets fired in rapid succession in the parking lot of an apartment complex where families lived, where children played, where people were supposed to be safe. The sound echoed off the buildings, sending residents scrambling for cover, reaching for their phones to call 911. By the time the first sirens wailed in the distance, the black Honda was already speeding away from the scene, leaving behind a 34-year-old mother who would never see her daughter graduate, never share another phone call with her aunt, never get the chance to rebuild the life she had been fighting so hard to create. The Meadows on Green complex, once a quiet residential community, was now a crime scene.
It's not something you want to see in your neighborhood, especially when we have so many children here. It's frightening in your own backyard.
There was a lot of shots. I heard bam, 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 bam. Yeah, a lot of shots.
Relatives identified the victim as Friedelene Daniel, who lived here at the Meadows on the Green apartment complex with her 16-year-old daughter. According to her family, when Friedelene dropped her daughter off at school Wednesday morning, she noticed her ex-boyfriend, Robin Caesar, was following her. They tell CBS 12 News Friedelene drove straight to the Boynton Beach police station to report that she was being followed and then went home. Her relatives say Caesar was waiting there in the parking lot with a gun. The victim was on the phone with her aunt in Haiti, they say, and she said to someone, "Oh, did you bring a gun to kill me?"
It was like boom, boom, and then it was a brief, maybe a 2-second pause, I'm going to say, and about 3 or 4 more. We just kind of froze there for a moment.
Violence is becoming more common here?
Yep.
What is your reaction to that?
I'm scared.
Neighbors who had watched Friedelene come and go, who had seen her walking with her daughter, who had witnessed the gradual escalation of Cesar's harassment, were now dealing with the reality that domestic violence had exploded into their backyard. The fear was palpable. If it could happen to Friedelene, a woman who had done everything right, who had sought help, who had tried to protect herself, then it could happen to anyone. At 5:04 p.m. on November 8, 2023, nearly 8 hours after Friedelene Daniel's murder, Robin Caesar was finally taken into custody. 8 hours during which he had been free to roam the streets of Boynton Beach while a mother's body lay cooling in a parking lot and her teenage daughter's world crumbled into pieces. When detectives sat Cesar down in that sterile interrogation room, what came out of his mouth was a chilling glimpse into the mind of a man who had convinced himself that murder was justified. There was no remorse in his voice, no recognition of the magnitude of what he had done. Instead, there was only the cold logic of someone who believed he had been wronged and had simply corrected the situation. Caesar's confession revealed a twisted justification that had driven him to pull that trigger 10 times. He told detectives about the final straw, his belief that Friedelene was moving on with her life, possibly seeing someone else. In his warped worldview, her attempt to rebuild and find happiness wasn't her right as a human being. It was a betrayal that demanded the ultimate punishment. "I could not stand to see her with another man," he admitted, as if this explained everything, as if his inability to accept rejection was somehow Friedelene's fault rather than his own psychological failing. These weren't the words of someone who had snapped in a moment of passion. This was the calculated reasoning of a man who had planned and executed a murder because his ego couldn't survive being told no. The first-degree murder charges that followed were almost anticlimactic. The evidence was overwhelming, the confession clear, the motive laid bare in his own words. But as the legal machinery began to turn, a more disturbing picture emerged, one that went far beyond Cesar's individual pathology. The systemic failures that had cost Friedelene Daniel her life began to come into focus. Here was a woman who had followed every protocol, who had sought help from the very people whose job it was to protect her. She had walked into a police station, told an officer she feared for her life, explained that her stalker had a gun, and begged not to be killed. 45 minutes later, she was dead. The question that haunted everyone who learned about this case wasn't just how Cesar could have committed such a heinous act. It was how a system designed to protect victims of domestic violence could have failed so catastrophically. How many other women were out there right now, trapped in the same deadly gap between asking for help and actually receiving it? Caesar's arrest was just the beginning. The real reckoning was yet to come. The internal affairs investigation that followed Friedelene Danielle's murder revealed details so shocking that they fundamentally changed how the Boynton Beach Police Department handles domestic violence cases. What emerged from the review of Officer Jermaine Jones's actions that morning wasn't just a case of poor judgment. It was a catastrophic failure of basic police protocol that cost a woman her life. The body cam footage told a story that was almost impossible to believe. Instead of recognizing the clear signs of escalating domestic violence, instead of following established protocols for high-risk situations, he treated Friedelene's desperate plea like a minor civil dispute between two adults who needed to work things out themselves. But perhaps most damning of all was what Jones said after both Friedelene and Cesar left the station. Captured on his own body cam, his words revealed a shocking misunderstanding of what had just transpired. "We ran them off. We told them, get the F out of here." This wasn't the language of an officer who understood he had just encountered a potential murder victim. This was someone who saw a woman's terror as an inconvenience, who viewed a stalker's presence in the police station lobby as nothing more than a nuisance to be shooed away. The investigation revealed that proper protocol in such situations is crystal clear. When someone reports being stalked by an armed individual, when they express genuine fear for their life, officers are trained to take immediate protective measures. This could include emergency protective orders, safe escort services, immediate arrest if probable cause exists, or at minimum, ensuring the victim has a safety plan and emergency contacts. None of this happened for Friedelene Daniel. Instead, she was sent back into the world with the same level of protection she had when she walked in, which is to say, none at all. The police station that should have been her sanctuary became just another place where her cries for help went unheard. Officer Jones received a 2-week suspension for his handling of the case. 2 weeks for failing to protect a woman who would be dead within 45 minutes of leaving his presence. The disparity between the consequences he faced and the consequences Friedelene suffered speaks to a system that still doesn't fully grasp the deadly seriousness of domestic violence. The body cam footage from that morning became required viewing for every officer in the department. A stark reminder of what happens when training fails, when protocols are ignored, and when a victim's desperate plea for help falls on deaf ears. But for Friedelene Daniel's family, no amount of training or policy changes could bring back the woman whose only crime was trusting that the system would protect her when she needed it most. Before we talk about what needs to change, I want to hear from you. How do you think Friedelene Danielle's murder could have been prevented? What should have happened differently that morning at the police station? Share your thoughts in the comments below because your voice matters in this conversation about protecting vulnerable people in our communities. The tragic death of Friedelene Daniel wasn't just a random act of violence. It was the predictable end result of warning signs that were ignored and a system that failed at every critical juncture. Understanding these warning signs could literally save lives, including your own or someone you love. The red flags in Cesar's behavior weren't subtle. Stalking behavior, inability to accept the end of a relationship, following an ex-partner, showing up at their workplace or home uninvited. These are all indicators that someone has moved beyond normal heartbreak into dangerous obsession. When Friedelene told Officer Jones that Cesar could not accept their breakup, she was describing textbook pre-violence behavior that domestic violence experts have studied for decades. Perhaps most critically, we need to understand that the period immediately following separation is the most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence. Statistics show that a woman is 70 times more likely to be killed in the weeks after leaving an abusive relationship than at any other time. This isn't because leaving makes the situation worse. It's because the abuser's sense of control has been threatened, and they often escalate to lethal violence as a final act of dominance. Friedelene was living in this danger zone, and everyone around her, especially law enforcement, should have recognized it. When someone reports being stalked by an ex-partner who has access to weapons, this should trigger immediate high-risk protocols, not casual dismissal. The system improvements needed are both obvious and urgent. Police departments need mandatory training on recognizing lethality indicators in domestic violence cases. Officers should be required to use evidence-based risk assessment tools when someone reports stalking or harassment by an intimate partner. There should be immediate safety planning, emergency protective orders available 24/7, and follow-up protocols to ensure victims aren't abandoned after making a report. Technology could play a crucial role here, too. GPS monitoring for high-risk offenders, panic button apps connected directly to emergency services, and automated check-in systems for victims could bridge the gap between asking for help and receiving protection. But individual awareness is equally important. If you or someone you know is experiencing stalking behavior, document everything. Save threatening messages, take photos of the person following you, keep a detailed log of incidents with dates and times. This documentation becomes crucial evidence if the situation escalates. Trust your instincts. If someone's behavior is making you uncomfortable, if an ex-partner won't accept that the relationship is over, if you feel like you're being watched or followed, these feelings are valid and deserve to be taken seriously, even if others minimize your concerns. Create a safety plan before you need it. Identify safe places you can go, people you can call, and keep important documents and some cash in a location your abuser doesn't know about. Share your concerns with trusted friends or family members so they know to check on you regularly. If you're in immediate danger, call 911. If you need help creating a safety plan or understanding your options, the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-79-9723, provides free, confidential support 24/7. They can connect you with local resources and help you navigate the system more effectively than Friedelene was able to. Most importantly, know that you deserve to be safe. You deserve to have your fears taken seriously. You deserve protection from people who would harm you. Friedelene Daniel deserved all of these things too, and the fact that she didn't receive them is a failure we must learn from, not a fate we must accept. Her death cannot be in vain if it leads to changes that save even one other person from the same tragic end. The changes needed aren't complicated or expensive. They require training, protocols, and most importantly, a shift in mindset that treats every report of stalking and harassment as a potential homicide in progress, because that's exactly what it often is. Officer Jones received a 2-week suspension. Robin Cesar will likely spend the rest of his life in prison, but Friedelene Daniel's daughter will grow up without her mother. Her aunt in Haiti will never again hear her voice on those precious phone calls. And a community has learned that even police stations aren't always safe havens for those who need them most. We cannot bring Friedelene back, but we can honor her memory by demanding better. We can insist that law enforcement receives proper training on domestic violence lethality indicators. We can advocate for immediate protective measures when someone reports being stalked by an armed ex-partner. We can work to close the gap that cost Friedelene her life. If this case has affected you, if you believe that no one should die 45 minutes after begging police for protection, then I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel and share this video. Spread awareness about the warning signs of escalating domestic violence. Start conversations in your community about how we can better protect vulnerable people. Friedelene Daniel's voice was silenced, but ours don't have to be. Let's make sure her story saves lives instead of just breaking hearts.